The economic rise of the People's Republic of China is among the most globally significant developments of recent decades. It was not too long ago that it seemed like the Chinese conglomerate was unstoppable, and many perceived its position as the number one economic power, surpassing the United States, was just a matter of time. But the Chinese miracle economic growth over the past 4 decades has come at a cost. Now the chips are falling into place, and the country's debt-laden property market is now revealing one of the biggest economic collapses in our lifetime. But how did China grow so quickly, and what's causing its downfall? You are watching Discover How. Sit back, relax, and let's discover together.
China, where economic growth is struggling. It came in at 4.9% in the third quarter this year. That's lower than analysts had forecast.
Of China's property sector start the next global financial crisis.
And the debt crisis among developers have slowed down the property market.
Since China began to open up and reform its economy in 1978, GDP growth has averaged almost 10% a year, and more than 800 million people have been lifted out of poverty. China's high growth, based on resource-intensive manufacturing, exports, and low-paid labor, has largely reached its limits and led to the economic, social, and environmental imbalances. Reducing these imbalances requires shifts in the structure of the economy from manufacturing to high-value services, and from investment to consumption. Beginning in 1979, China launched several economic reforms. The central government made reforms which followed in stages. Economic control of various enterprises was given to provincial and local governments, which were generally allowed to operate and compete in free market principles. In addition, citizens were encouraged to start their own businesses. Since the introduction of economic reforms, China's economy has grown substantially faster than during the pre-reform period and, for the most part, has avoided major economic disruptions. With such unprecedented growth, what has gone wrong? There are many factors to consider when understanding the current economic turmoil that China is experiencing at the moment. For one thing, it has massively overbuilt various key sectors of the economy, like the housing sector, manufacturing, and the country's infrastructure, just to name a few. Its massive projects have especially affected the housing sector. A number of major developers have gone bankrupt. These developers are highly leveraged and pose the greatest threat to the banking system, which has grown more through shadow banking and subprime lending in the last few years than anything sustainable.
The Federal Reserve has warned that stresses in China's real estate sector could impact the United States and the wider global economy if they first spread to the Chinese financial system. China's heavily indebted real estate sector has been the subject of intense scrutiny of particularly the embattled firm Evergrande. In its latest financial stability report, the U.S. Central Bank said the problems in China could lead to a, quote, sudden correction of real estate prices, which would have the potential to hit the Chinese financial system and strain global markets.
There are other factors contributing to the economic collapse that is unfolding. Over the past few months, the Chinese economy has been hammered by rigid COVID lockdowns and crackdowns on the private sector, and an intensifying property crisis, such so that growth slowed to only 0.4% in the second quarter of the current year. Analysts now think that China will adhere to its rigid COVID strategy till next year. But the more pressing problem for the government at the moment no doubt has to be the housing market and many banks going on the edge. China's economy is facing a dangerous cocktail of stalling growth, high unemployment, spreading mortgage payment strikes, and continued COVID shutdowns that threaten to explode with serious social and political consequences. The worsening meltdown is the country's debt-laden property market. For years, property has been a key driver of China's inexorable growth, with prices rising steadily for decades and offering a seemingly one-way bet to guarantee income growth for the new middle class.
I'm talking about this.
China's property market accounts for an estimated 30% of its economy. However, that relentless expansion can no longer be taken for granted, as new weak GDP numbers show. Are we about to witness an economic bubble bursting? Many analysts believe so. As we speak, a boycott campaign is brewing in 81 cities in China. With the risk of more defaults, China's property sector is on shaky ground.
A massive protest over frozen bank deposits turned violent in Zhengzhou in China. Police clashing with demonstrators on Sunday, demonstrators who were angry that some rural banks have kept millions of dollars frozen since April. At the time, the banks said they were upgrading their internal systems, but customers say they've heard nothing from the banks about the matter since then. The protest was among the largest in China since the pandemic.
Banks have a debt pile of more than $9 trillion. Chinese banks have lent this to the property sector. Adding to the crisis, first, property developers defaulted, and now new homeowners are willfully defaulting on their loans. This has led banks in China to go through major crises on the edge. The people shown in the video are from the Henan province. On April 4th, banks stopped withdrawals. People who had deposited money in the banks could not withdraw. Understandably so, people tried protesting, and the government responded with a fierce crackdown. The scale of the problem is massive. This is a mortgage crisis. Homebuyers in more than 50 Chinese cities are defaulting on their debts because they haven't gotten their homes. The repercussions could be grave and the effects could be felt worldwide. Famously, Evergrande was the largest property developer in China. It has the largest debt pile in the world. 35% of projects belong to Evergrande. With Evergrande seeming closer and closer to defaulting on its debt, China's property sector has become one of the biggest liabilities. The government has plans to pump cash into the economy, but housing projects are still going bust, and borrowers are not paying their debts. Banks are on the verge of collapse. What's happening to China is similar to the American subprime mortgage crisis. Will the Chinese economy survive? It is difficult to say, but just like the COVID outbreak, the Chinese government is trying to hide this crisis from the world. But inevitably, the crisis is brewing, and it's just a matter of time before it spills over into the global stage. Do you believe that we are on the verge of a bubble bursting? How do you think the collapse of various sectors in the Chinese economy affect the economy in your country? Is there any way to stop the collapse from happening? I would love to know your opinion in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video and found it helpful, please consider subscribing and leaving your comment down below. That's all for now. My name is Gio, and you've been watching Discover How. I'll see you in the next episode. Have a great day.